kicking it off, tell us what did you build and what did you help create in the New York City ecosystem? And if you were to do that again from the ground up, what were the steps that have made you successful?
That's a question. Does anybody want to start? Andy, you want to start?
I did not build it. I helped build it. I inherited it. It's the New York Tech Alliance, which was previously the New York Tech Meetup. And we are a nonprofit organization that works to create a collaborative space here in New York for the tech ecosystem. We act as a hub of activity for the tech ecosystem, and we're known for our monthly event, the New York Tech Meetup, where we bring technologists to showcase their technologies on stage to a room full of amazing community. And what we've built is exactly that, a community of entrepreneurs, of technologists, of professionals in the ecosystem that come together to showcase. It's a show and tell kind of atmosphere of the technologies that they're building, and it's been an amazing experience to be a part of that ecosystem and see it grow over time. It was created originally by Scott Heiferman, the founder of Meetup, as an experiment to see if his platform was going to work, and it's worked. It grew from a couple of people around his boardroom to a monthly event where at our peak we were selling out the Skirball Auditorium, selling over 1,000 tickets every month. We would sell out in minutes. That's what it was like when I joined. It was phenomenal. The ecosystem overall has become a little bit more saturated, so we share that space now with a ton of amazing programs. We still sell out every month. We sell out our tickets at about 300, 350, depending on the venue that we're at for that month. And we're regularly at AppNexus, and it's been really great to be a part of that growth of the community overall, and seeing it grow from barely any technology, any entrepreneur, startup founder is really building things here in New York to this amazing ecosystem that we have today.
Thank you so much, Ian, for having me, and thank you so much for the audience for joining us. Well, I've been working in New York Tech for the last 7 years. When I first joined an accelerator in a program manager role, it was with ERA, Entrepreneurs Roundtable Accelerator. Those were the days, my friends. I mean, that was very, very different from what we're seeing today. We could have not had this amazing conference back in 2011. There were just not enough people in the ecosystem. We were very much a traditional accelerator, traditional model, investment for equity and program demo days, stuff like that. And after ERA, I joined Grand Central Tech, which is now known as Company, and I ran that program for 2.5 years until very recently. To your question about how we got here and what would have we done differently, I don't think it would have been possible to do anything differently. When I was getting started in the ecosystem, we were learning as we went. There was a lot of interest for the startup industry, but there were just not enough stakeholders in the ecosystem to really cater to the full range of questions and demand. And I think as there was more demand, those key stakeholders, incumbents in the ecosystem, were like, "Oh, this is great. Well, we're a legal firm. We could definitely learn more about convertible notes and talk to founders in the accelerator programs about that. Oh, we know about taxes. We could potentially go into startup ecosystem and teach founders about that. I'm an executive coach. Why wouldn't I teach a founder how to be better at what they do?" So little by little, step by step, all of us were building this ecosystem that is now known today as the New York Tech ecosystem, and we're now comparing ourselves to San Francisco. I don't know if the comparison is fair, but the reason why we're here now is because of what started in 2010, 2011.
Well, I also want to thank SAP for this unbelievable space. This is great. I get to profile this nice blue jacket and everything, And of course, the host of the show. And John Lynn, I don't know if he's around here, but I just wanted to say thank you to him publicly because he's the one who personally invited me. And Yen Lin for putting together this panel and some of the great questions. I want to also acknowledge my co-founder, Bruce Lincoln, who's here, and a bevy of our interns are here. You guys stand up. These interns here are also here. So it's great. University of Virginia and Butler. I always say Baylor, but it's Butler. So for us, we've always had an ecosystem. It wasn't really anything new for us. We've always had an ecosystem uptown. We had Uber uptown before Uber was around because cabs didn't come uptown. So in Upper Manhattan, you had to call, but a cab would be there in 60 seconds. That's for real. Yellow cabs back in the day just would not come uptown. So we had Uber, we just didn't have an app. And I'm making that point to say that we've always had an ecosystem. Harlem is riddled with small business owners, connectivity, figuring out how to work together, how to really penetrate the community, how to galvanize people, always been there. One of the things that was lacking in our estimation was the true tech that needed to empower all those businesses and to empower our stakeholders and to empower the ecosystem that needed to grow. And so we, having come to many of the meetups and many of the Skirlball events and always find ourselves going downtown for any of this, we just said, hey, why don't we try to do a meetup uptown? 2013. We said, let them, and we would come downtown for co-working space, and we'd come down for learning more about accelerators and incubators. And we're going, what the hell is this? We've been doing this forever. Why don't we try to do it in Harlem? Our very first meetup, and Andy remembers this, is we said, Bruce and I were like, man, if we do a meetup, maybe we get 30 or 40 people. That'd be like really big for us. Normally it's just him and I. 500 people came out. And we were just flabbergasted. We couldn't believe it. And we realized that this energy and the creativity that was coming through that particular meetup was going to require us to build the infrastructure to support it, keep it sustainable, and really help people move forward with their ideas and innovations. We actually launched an app that very night. We have had meetups ever since. But what really became important to us was what is it really built to do? What is an ecosystem, and specifically an accelerator-based ecosystem, what is it really supposed to do? And what we figured out, or what we believe anyway, is that it's to support the idea, the business, the people around a variety of things that make up an ecosystem. One of them is space. Space is one of those, that's why it's so great to be here, to see that they're hosting people, letting people work out of this, have events here. Space is critical to any type of accelerator ecosystem. Second is, of course, you need to have a working pipeline. You need to have workforce. Third, you need to have customers. I always crack up when I hear everyone talking about raising money, and that's important to do, but it's really important to get a customer. If somebody doesn't like what you're doing, then you got to reevaluate. So an accelerator ecosystem says, hey, we might be able to find you the right customer to get you moving forward. Fourth, of course, investment's important. You got to have capital and to accelerate yourself. And finally, and that's not the end of the list, there's a whole lot of things that an ecosystem is supposed to do when it comes to acceleration. But certainly you want to galvanize people in your area geographically and even nationally and internationally to find the right partners and collaborators and people that you can work with. And that's the way we sort of envisioned how Upper Manhattan could really sustain a accelerating ecosystem. And the 5 components, and I'll end here, the 5 components that we, Silicon Harlem, felt very responsible for was to create an ecosystem that was sustainable based on 5 key pillars. And if anyone wants to create an accelerator anywhere in the world, you ought to think about these 5 things. One of them is you have to have the ability to connect and speak the language with your local academics, from preschool to college. And in Harlem, we have 12 colleges. A lot of people don't even know that. We have 12 colleges in Harlem alone. We speak that language. My co-founder is a senior fellow at Columbia, so we speak that language. We can sit down with the academics and really start thinking about how do we really deliver the kind of activity in this community that needs to be happening. Second, we speak government, public language, right? We help write policy and we work with the electives and we really get them involved in our ecosystem, in our accelerating ecosystem. Is really critical because they clear the way for a lot of things. Third, we speak the stakeholder language, those institutions in our neighborhood, the hospitals, the libraries, the nonprofits. All of these are part of our ecosystem. Fourth, we speak the private sector language. We speak engineering, technology. We're really adept at all of the sort of issues that are facing the current infrastructure, from the deployment of 5G that you've been reading about to all the Internet of Things you've been reading about. We speak that language. We had a meeting yesterday with General Electric to figure out new ways to provide power into the city. And finally, and probably the most important one, is we speak the community language. We talk about local, think local. We live and work in Harlem. So we speak the language. We know what it means to have a cash checking place on every other corner in Upper Manhattan. We know what that means. We know that that's more popular than a bank. We know it's also a ripoff, but we understand the culture. So being able to speak the language has given us the credibility to maintain and really accelerate that ecosystem. So I'll end with that, but I will also say I've been called an OG before, but the team that called me that said, "You're an old geek." So I took it the right way.
It's a compliment to some people. Speaking of infrastructure, Galina, I would love for you to talk about how it was different building Grand Central Tech versus ERA, because ERA in the early days, like you mentioned, it was very hard to organize people. But when GCT was coming out, there was a much larger, ecosystem of entrepreneurs, investors, advisors.
Yeah.
And how did that impact your strategy?
It completely impacted my strategy, and I have to tell you, there's a huge difference between super early stage, if any of you have super early stage companies, versus a growing company. There's different things. I have a little bit of a echo here. Yes, thank you. So, in the early days of ERA, I didn't start ERA. I was hired by ERA to be their first program manager and lead the program. A lot of us were focused on the immediate needs of an entrepreneur building out a super early stage business in, shortest terms possible. 3 months was our first program. It's in and out, it's super quick, you don't really have time to think. You don't think about things like, where's the ping pong table, or where are the snacks? We were based out of Times Square. You walk into Times Square, there's like Elmo walking around and Superman, and you're passing by and trying to, diversion techniques with a tourist, and you're walking up the building, and it's a tiny office and a stacked up ramen noodles. That's all our founders had. We had very limited resources in the first program, and it felt good. There's a collegiate spirit. Everybody was, working towards something great. And so, of course, the strategy was very different. The strategy was survival. How do you teach founders survival? How do you teach them basic skills to float? How do you get them to raise their very first round, which were, much smaller rounds in those times? There were no conferences that were, encompassing, where you could meet all types of investors, all types of pitch to any type of angel like we can today. We're actually not aware of the privilege that we have nowadays, having all these resources. So ERA has been doing very, very well. Murat, one of the founders of ERA, was on stage earlier this morning, talking about how many exits they've had and how much money the companies have raised. But I went to GCT in 2016. In 2016, as opposed to 2011, in New York startup tech ecosystem is like a completely different playing field. We went from two tech accelerators, Techstars and ERA in 2011, to 122 or so programs that identify as incubator and accelerator. Just think about that. In a very, very short span of time. And not only were we now tasked with teaching the basic things to the founders who perhaps needed it, although GCT typically works with slightly later stage companies, but it's also understanding what resources there are, understanding how to use these resources, understanding not only how do I pitch an investor, but how do I create an investor pipeline? How do I look at the spreadsheet in front of me, and how do I strategically think about my round? What partners should I be looking at? How many of these partners could be potentially my pilot programs? Does that lead to a customer, right? Does that lead to acquiring a potentially big customer and distribution? So all of a sudden we evolved from a scarcity of resources, which was nice for a little bit, but once we started building towards having more and more and more and more resources, we needed to all of a sudden teach our entrepreneurs how to distinguish which resource is beneficial to them the most at which point of the life cycle. And also, how do you keep your focus? How do you keep your eyes on the prize? And how do you then scale past that initial phase of survival into this new stage where you're, okay, I've raised my first round, and now I need to show some numbers, and now I need to go and talk to all these VCs, and there's a lot of them, but that doesn't mean they all want my business, and it doesn't mean that I want all of their money. So it all of a sudden becomes a thing about educating the entrepreneur, creating almost, that's why we call them curricula. We don't just call them programs anymore. We say curriculum. So we're going into almost the university and education space to train a founder to be savvy about, one, building their company, but two, being an efficient CEO, an entrepreneur.
Yeah, let's dig deeper into that optimization of time, because in my mind, when an ecosystem or program is effective, what you're really doing is getting a founder from point A to point Z in the fastest way possible. And that can mean resources, it can mean connections, it can be business, right? So from an infrastructure level, what are the things that you build as a program that allows for that action to happen as soon as possible?
Well, one thing we try to emphasize is the infrastructure in and of itself. One of the things that we realize is that the infrastructure that you work with, when we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about essentially broadband connections, the kind of equipment you work with, things of that nature. One of our employees out of Berkeley came to us and was telling us a great story about when he came out of Berkeley, he came to New York and wanted to work in construction before he got into something else. And so he had to get his OSHA license. And in order to get this OSHA certification, you have to do it online. And he had a great computer with great connection, and another guy who started the exact same day he did, he got it done in a weekend. The other guy took 3-4 weeks because he didn't have a good infrastructure for his computer access and things like that. And he just had to go to libraries and all this other stuff. So one of the things we really emphasize is, and we're trying to do that more and more, in fact, with even established companies, is if you build the right infrastructure for your business, just the way you have to operate more efficiently, you will get to the next level of your business a lot quicker. If you're on slow Wi-Fi, or if you have a poor infrastructure in your office, or if you don't even have an office, all those type of things that really are we take for granted, right? We just think everybody must have great connectivity and all this other stuff. Well, it's just not true. There's a lot of people that are falling behind just because of infrastructure. They could be brilliant. So I think part of your point about just how fast can someone get to whatever level they're trying to get to, one component of that is certainly their infrastructure. The second one is, this really comes down to a lot of connections. Who do you know? How strong is that network of people? Can they really help you? Can they figure out a problem or a solution to a problem that you're having? Which is oftentimes the case with startups, is just there's a roadblock and I don't know how to get through it. Do you have an ecosystem, a bevy of people around you that can say, oh, I've handled that before. You need a spreadsheet? You need to figure out your P&L. You need to figure out how you are going to invest in this or that. I have a CFO because even though I'm good with numbers, I'd rather have him be on the hook for whatever the hell happens to us. So I think it's really important to surround yourself with that ecosystem of people that helps you get through those blocks. That's the stuff that slows you down. And I think another reason why accelerators have become so popular, and I still think we need more. I don't think we have a lot. I think we need a hell of a lot more, because the statistic I read about 2 or 3 years ago from the Small Business Administration of the United States was saying that 70% of small businesses that start fail. 70 to 75% fail, but 70 to 75% are successful if they go through a incubator and accelerator. That's 100% difference. I mean, to go from failing to succeeding just because you've been in an accelerator. So I think we need a heck of a lot more of them than we have to this very day.
Oh, there also could be a selection bias there, where the best companies are the ones who are attracted to accelerators. So the causal impact is not necessarily clear in that statistic.
That's another topic, but I agree with you.
Something to add also to the infrastructure, if we're digging in a little bit deeper. If any of you have ever applied for an accelerator incubator, typically we now have a savvier entrepreneur who knows the right questions to ask. Right? And so a lot of the questions that I've received in the last 7 years is, well, what do I get out of this? Well, what are you guys offering? Before it was like, how do I get in? How do I get in? They don't know what's behind the door. Now it's like, well, I don't know about this. I don't know what's behind the door, and I just need more information. And I think it's a smarter way to do that. That's an educated customer. So on the infrastructure side, apart from office space and great Wi-Fi, and that's always something every space is struggling with for some reason, be it great broadband or whatever. But yes, apart from Wi-Fi, you need great partners who can supply you with the right basic resources for your team. If you have a basic team, let's assume you have a tech product, you obviously need certain things your CTO or VP of engineering is going to ask for, right? So you need access to those cloud credits. We have Google Cloud represented here as one of the partners. So every accelerator program will try to supply you with resources like cloud credits, like access to legal, access to accounting, access to all kinds of, financial audit people, so on and so forth. But, that's where probably the commonality should end, because we should be looking at the startup accelerator ecosystems as ones catering to their specific customer. And hopefully by now we all know who that customer is. So beyond that, maybe that's the mentor network, and we were talking about the quality of mentor networks today at the conference as well. So it's the quality of people that you give access to. It's not just any people, it's great people that can help your company in your stage of the life cycle. And it's about access. It's always been about access.
So Andy, how do you feel about what Clayton mentioned about the need for more accelerator programs? I think you've seen with New York Tech Alliance what happens when there is a proliferation of programs. Do you think that that's positively impacted your organization?
It might not have positively impacted my organization per se, because we are no longer the only game in town. We're not the only nonprofit catering to the tech ecosystem any longer, but I think it is good for the ecosystem overall. What I love about seeing in the ecosystem and the addition of all of these programs is the fact that they can become very affinity focused, focusing on demographics that are not getting the representation to the larger ecosystem that fewer programs means. And so, for example, I sit on the board of Start Out, which is a LGBTQ organization that focuses on getting LGBTQ entrepreneurs access to VC funds. And so I'm very happy that those organizations exist and that the addition of these organizations have increased over the years. And I hope that they continue to increase, because I think that means a more diverse ecosystem overall. It means more resources that are available to help these diverse entrepreneurs in a way that is very unique to their needs. And that's one of the main goals that we have at the Alliance is how do we provide that bigger and greater access to the larger ecosystem to these communities that might not have direct access to it, and how do we use our current network of connections to gain access for those individuals.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about access. We've talked a lot about the benefits that an accelerator program can provide to an entrepreneur. Now let's talk about what's not obvious. So if someone were to pull the curtains back and look at the details of your programming, what is something that is not obvious to an outsider? And an outsider can be anyone who has not operated an ecosystem or accelerator program, or anyone who's just an observer of the tech ecosystem.
I'm one of 2 employees for the New York Tech Alliance. We have maintained at that level since our inception, and it's a project that a lot of people don't realize that one has full-time employees, because a lot of people don't realize that the meetup is part of a nonprofit organization, and 2, that a lot can be done on just a little bit of resources.
What I think is not always obvious is, one, the quality of the network. Not every program posts their network on the website. So, when you're interviewing with a program and you will ask, well, who are your mentors? Unless some names are named, it's often very obscure. That's one. 2, the quality of the programming itself. I agree that we need more programs, and I agree that we need more programs targeted at specific demographic as well. But I also think that in a span of 7-8 years, it's very hard to continuously come up with new programs that are on the same level of quality. And I think that because we have so much access to marketing, social media, and we can market programs more efficiently by word of mouth as well, but mostly through known channels, I think it's just sometimes not quite possible to discern the differences. And I think it's fair, it's fair. Sometimes you go through programming, I just lost 7% of my company. All right, what are you going to do about that? So I think that's why, for that reason, a lot of companies end up in that cycle of going through one program and then taking up another and taking up another, and hopefully only one takes equity and not all 3. So I think the quality and the value add is not always obvious unless you've talked to somebody who's gone through that program, has had a great experience. Having said that, that doesn't guarantee success for your company. It can only guarantee that there's a stamp of approval on the team that runs the program, and on the general quality of programming involved.
Right, and even with a certain brand, say Techstars, the value of the programming in New York City is very different from the value in London, for example.
Let me quickly just add a little bit of context around that question. So in Upper Manhattan, Harlem and Upper Manhattan is the size of Atlanta. Just let that sink in. All right, it's the size of Atlanta. 700,000 people uptown. How many accelerators do we have? 1.
Wow.
So when you talk about fairness and access and all that kind of stuff, we got to look at the numbers a little bit. There's 700,000 people in Harlem. A lot of them, if not majority, are in some level of entrepreneurialism. And we got 1 accelerator. So when you say Techstars or you say these other ones, none of them are uptown. 0. So and you can go to a lot of urban cities and find that exact same dynamic. So when I say there needs to be a lot more, I don't want to take it out of context. I want to keep it in context. There's a real reason why I say that. As far as your other question about, what's the other side of this? You can hear all about the good stuff. What are some of the challenges that you might not hear all about? I always say it's sort of on both sides. You really do got to look under the hood, because everyone looks real shiny on the outside, but you got to look under the hood for that entrepreneur and make sure they really do have the qualifications, sort of the passion and all those type of things, because what they tell you is going to sound good every single time, but if you look under the hood, sometimes it's actually not what you expected. But the same has to happen on that accelerator. To your point, people are starting to become more savvy, ask more questions. You have to look under the hood of the accelerator and say, is this really going to help me? Just because they call themselves an accelerator or an incubator doesn't necessarily mean they may even have an expertise in what you're trying to do. So I think that's a reality, that everything looks shiny. I know a lot of people that look real shiny, and I'm going, wow, I can't wait to, there's nothing there. So we got to figure out how to do that every single time. And that sometimes we do got to accept people that you don't know much about or even know much about their business, because you never know what might happen. But I think for the most part, we all got to do a lot more inviting in and due diligence on each other.
Anything from Andy about that?
Well, I also think to draw the comparison, we are not an accelerator program. We are not any kind of formalized accelerator program. What we do is a community service as a nonprofit to showcase entrepreneurship. And so I think we get that confusion a lot. People come to us and, what are your programs? How much equity? What does it cost? And it's like, no, this is the service that we provide free to the community through our monthly event. And so I think just understanding that and looking at the different resources that are available, looking under the curtain of some of those resources and making sure that those connections are a benefit to you and their audience has a benefit for you.
Well, let me say, Andy, even though you may not have the title accelerator the way it's been thrown around over the years, you guys have helped so many startups get to another level, which is really the true definition of acceleration, is to be able to move a company from where they are to another. That's why this space is so great. I keep coming back to this space because we haven't seen a lot of spaces like this, and it's all about trying to move the company from one place to the next. And you were doing it at the very beginning of this entire ecosystem of New York City, you and the team over there. So don't sell yourself short on that. I won't let you, because I've seen so many companies walk through that skirball and get an investment as a result.
Okay,
he can pay me later.
We have to close up, but I want to leave the audience with what you think the future looks like for ecosystems in New York City and around the world, and what do you wish to see for the future of the development of tech ecosystems?
I want to see more access. I definitely think that is going to be key for New York City as a whole to grow forward. Access to those young entrepreneurs that have no idea what technology is right now, who don't know how to even break into that larger tech ecosystem. I want there to be absolutely more access, and that's the reason that I volunteer on the Start Out board, that I volunteer or organize the Queer Tech Meetup, that I work with Clayton and Silicon Harlem, with the Bronx Tech Meetup, a Coalition for Queens. There's so many resources available in this amazing city, and I just want to see that access grow more and more and more.
And by that you mean you want to see more events and more programs?
Directed towards those individuals that don't have the pedigree necessarily, or that educational background, or traditional access. Like that non-traditional access is where we need to really focus our attention as a city and to grow it forward.
Got it, so more direct outreach as well.
Yeah, I'd go even further. I'm an immigrant to this country. I'm not American, still not a citizen. And when I came here 8 years ago, what really struck me was how diverse this city was. How absolutely diverse, how many languages were being spoken around, how many interesting eateries, parades alone in the city. Come on, streets are blocked all the time. Yet the industry that we're in does not reflect that. Mm-hmm. And we talk about pedigree. Which is kind of in terms of a high-priced horse or a groomed dog. Like, you look in the teeth, see Ellis Island from here. I mean, it's fascinating to me, because in the VC industry, in this industry, pedigree often means Ivy League school, It means that you're able to raise friends and family. I mean, I don't have friends and family I can go to for 20K and still retain those friends and family down the line. So, you know, this industry unfortunately has not caught up yet with the diversity of the city. But I'm hoping that we're on our way. With you know, your organization, with your efforts, with you know, the fact that we're trying to bring more women and diverse candidates into the workforce, whether by force, by putting people in the spotlight and saying you should be hiring more people of color, more diverse people, or by saying, you know, what's up with this? You know, and walk into the you just committed, had a manifesto about, you know, diversity, yet all I see is a bunch of white dudes. No disrespect to white dudes. Have worked with a bunch of you and love you all. But the fact is, you know, we haven't caught up yet, and I really wish that we would. I really wish that we would stop looking at pedigree from that very one-sided perspective.
I totally agree, and I would be all for a quota system, especially for programs that want to attract more diverse entrepreneurs. Their program managers should reflect the people they want to attract.
Yep.
My conclusion, first of all, I wanted to thank, pronounce your name for me, please.
That's right, Yen.
Yen, okay. So I want to thank you for your great moderation. I want to thank, of course, Accelerator Awesome. You guys are, in fact, awesome. And SAP for this unbelievable space. That's for the 5th time I think I've mentioned that. And you said, what's the future look like? So
Yes.
Definitely the future is bright. I truly believe that. And let me quickly say that we have absolutely one of the best opportunities in our lifetime right now. I truly believe that we are in the best opportunity. We have the best opportunity, at least in our sort of ecosystem of technology and innovation and things of that nature. The entire country's infrastructure has to be upgraded. And that's not only just streets and bridges and things of that nature, but also our infrastructure from a telecommunications perspective, all needed, telecommunications, power, et cetera, all needed to let any startup succeed in this country. And by the way, this is a worldwide issue. The question becomes that I have, and I want to leave with this audience, is who's going to be in design of that next infrastructure? Will it reflect some of us or all of us? In the past, the infrastructure of this country and most countries have been designed by men with great degrees, men that grow up in suburbs and live in the suburbs, have garages and grass and let the door open and let the kids go out and play. Guys like me. That's how I grew up. That's how I live now. So when I think about my world, I look at it through that prism. It's difficult when you realize that there's people that don't grow up with a car. There's people that live in a concrete jungle, or people that have a whole different way of living. And so what I'm trying to challenge us all to do is think outside of our prisms a little bit and go, how do we create the next infrastructure that's going to support the ideas, the innovation, the energy of all people, rich or poor, in an equitable way? That is the absolute challenge of our lifetime right now, is to build an infrastructure for equity. I don't do ID politics. I don't really do identity politics. I think we're all just the same. We're all human beings, and the diversity comes from our frame of references. But what's really important is, do we provide equal access and opportunity to people? Is that what we're going to do? And infrastructure has everything to do with it. If you read any historical books about infrastructure, you'll find why a bridge was built, why a highway was built, and ultimately resulted into a divide. And that's because whoever built it, having perhaps their own prism, maybe not even thinking a negative thing about anyone, but the way it came out, a lot of it was by design, by the way, but a lot of it comes out to create divides, which thwarts our innovation. It limits our ability to accelerate a company or a startup community. Let's not let that happen again. Let's all come to the table. Where is that person that's disabled? When you look at the sidewalks, last time I was at SAP, I tried to share this point. Sidewalks have cutouts in them. It was fought for by people in wheelchairs. Well, who does it benefit? If you're pulling luggage, you're looking for the cutout. If you're pushing a carriage, you're looking for a cutout. If you're walking with a walker, you're looking for a cutout. And people like me are looking for a cutout because I don't feel like stepping up on a curb. So this is not a zero-sum game. When we're building something for equity, it's going to help everybody. So I leave this audience and my fellow panels and everyone in this place, I can hear my voice. The challenge of the next 10 years is to build an infrastructure for equity.
And I would certainly echo that. And in particular, I'm very, very excited to see what happens with the female founder space and seeing more and more female fund managers and actually women of wealth investing back into the community and really creating a virtuous cycle of more wealth creation, especially for women entrepreneurs. I want to thank everyone for your fantastic participation in this panel, and Matt and John for organizing this great conference.
Hello, hello. All right, guys, we have a 15-minute coffee break that will start in 5 minutes. This is what we're going to do. We have a 5-minute word, and we're running late.